Well, an investigation has found that 41 military personnel and veterans have taken their own lives just this year. It's the same number of Australians who were killed in the Afghanistan war, which lasted for 13 years. News Corp has reported, splashed across its front page of its Sunday edition today, and it reveals that a high number of Australian soldiers who return from war zones are depressed and anxious, but unable to find help. Joining me now live is the News Corp journalist responsible for this investigative story, Ruth Lampert. Thanks very much for being here.
Pleasure.
Unbelievable figure. I mean, most Australians, you know, we watch so closely over these wars, people that die in them, but to find out that in this year alone, we're talking about the exact same number of deaths to a 13-year conflict, this requires urgent action, presumably.
Presumably, yes, it would. I mean, I was dismayed at what I found, and we knew that there was a problem out there. Several years ago, I'd been alerted to it. It was very difficult to get figures, and in fact, there are no actual official statistics that are kept. It is possible to do this, but it hasn't been done yet.
Why is it that these return soldiers feel like they can't get help? Because it strikes me at one level, even though the numbers are alarming, it strikes me at one level as obvious that when you come back from a war, the kind of emotional distress that could cause, that the government will be right in there, the military will be right in there offering an incredible amount of assistance.
I think there is there is an attempt to actually try and address the problem, but the reasons why people take their own lives are very complicated, and the solutions are very complicated, which is why this can't just be a simple fix. We'll throw more, assistance to some of the organisations that are out there. That actually has to be completely across the board, involving the Defence Force, the Department of Veterans Affairs, where there are massive problems as well.
You've been talking to families of victims, obviously, as part of this long investigation. Take us through what some of them have told you, in terms of their experience in this.
The families have felt that they have not had the support that they've needed. In some instances, there have been multiple attempts, up to 8 attempts at a veteran who was returned, for example, from Afghanistan. He was suicidal, and he tried 8 times, and he died on the 8th time. Now his wife said that she was offered nothing to help her, who was the person left to fix essentially a broken airman, a broken sniper.
So what's the message, I guess, or what is the government doing? I know that there was an announcement during the week from the Prime Minister. The cynic in me wonders whether or not, alerted to your story, the government wanted to get out in front of it. Either way, at least they're doing something. But what's the message, particularly I'm thinking, for serving military people or the families and those military people who may well be deployed soon for the very first time? They would be reading this and they would obviously be worried for the future.
The message I've collected from families is that they actually really didn't know. They didn't know much about what they should expect when their loved ones returned home, what they should be looking out for. These are absolutely vital things. If the military is going to leave these people in the hands of the families when they return, the families need to be incredibly well supported, not just with pamphlets and not just with an email here and there, but actually they have to be involved in presumably very intensive courses themselves.
Is this all frontline personnel in war situations, or does it exclude, for example, the most heavily trained, the SAS and the commandos? Does it include people behind the scenes?
It includes, in my investigations in the last 6 months, it has actually included every single sort of ex-servicemen and women, and current serving as well.
So it's not as though you can necessarily, if you like, train for it. This is something that depends on each individual, how they react to that kind of unbelievable circumstance, no matter how prepared they think they are for it.
Exactly. And look, to be honest, we do focus understandably on those that have gone away and served in war for us, so that we don't have to see the things they see. But it isn't just people that have been deployed. It's also those that are who have trained for deployment. They also are in a very high-risk group, I would say.
And what about the expert response in terms of the where to from here? What more can be done? You mentioned before that it's not just about saying that more can be done or necessarily just throwing more dollars into it. It's obviously about how all of that is structured. I noticed people like Australian of the Year, Patrick McGorry, have been featured in this story, responding to it. Well, what are the experts saying?
The experts are saying that there needs to be a far greater publicity sort of campaign for the veterans families, people in the community, so people know where to go to get help, because this is something which is seriously lacking. There needs to be a simplification of the Department of Veterans Affairs process, the compensation process. It is legalistic, it is clunky, it is time-consuming, and it quite frankly turns, from my conversations, it turns the mentally well into a bit of a fury as well. So it's so complicated.
So even the process itself, if you're already, if you like, on the edge in terms of how you've reacted to what you've seen when over in a crisis situation, you then go through the process to try to just get help, which might not even at that stage be mental assistance. It might just simply be, some sort of compensation for how it's affected your work or whatever else, and then you spiral.
That's true. I mean, I heard instances, and this is a process problem and a communication problem between Defence and Department of Veterans Affairs. People who have essentially lost their occupation because they have PTSD and they must leave their job. Once they are unable to work elsewhere, they need to reprove the same injury that occurred to them, that actually already occurred to them in the DVA, that they lost their job for. So they actually have to reprove it, and sometimes that process can take 4 years.
Yeah, we've had the front page there across the front of our screen there from the Daily Telegraph edition, Save Our Sons. Ruth Lampard, we appreciate you coming in to talk about this important investigation that you've done. Thanks very much.
Pleasure.
Well, support from these organisations is available for anyone who is feeling distressed. You can call the SANE helpline on 1800 18 72 63. You can call Lifeline on 131 114 or Beyond Blue.